Yeah, we just have a talk.
Chat. This one can all the way to the end one.
Oh.
Okay, thank you.
I still want to film something.
Oh, really? Later lor.
Okay.
So, I heard about your $3,000 suit. Can you share more? Okay, it's strange to me because you're not a person that buys branded stuff.
That's right.
Except for watches, maybe.
No, I'm wearing like a $30 watch.
Yeah. So why the $3,000 suit?
I think the question would be how to convince me to buy a $3,000 suit. Right?
Yeah, and you don't just have one, right? You have like how many sets?
I have a few. They're not all $3,000, but I think
$5,000.
price besides the point, right? I think it's like, how do you convince someone who is clueless, a bit confused, right, to even buy a product, right, from you in the first place, and then not just from you, but to buy something that's more expensive than even the usual. So I think my $3,000 suit is a nice story to tell. I think before stepping into the suit making company, right, what I have is I'm someone who is very clueless when it comes to clothes.
Fashion.
Yes. So unlike most of the girls out there or most of the ladies out there who goes into the department and knows 100% exactly what they're there for, what colors suit them, right? What kind of style and design they're going for. I am kind of clueless when I walk into a shop. And it's the same way for me when I was looking at a suit as well. So after looking around online, looking at some of the designs, I still have no idea. And I think that's pretty much of how most clients are when they're looking for something. Firstly, because they're not an expert. And I was not an expert in the suit, right? And secondly, there was just so many things out there, so much choices. And if you really think about the anatomy of a suit, now I'm pretty well versed in suits now, not fully, but well enough. There's so many parts to a suit. There's a inner lining, there's the flat pockets or not, you have your lapels, you have even the cuffs, what are the cloth, what's the color, right? Whether you have breast pockets, no breast pockets, how many buttons do you have, and so on and so forth. There's so many things that you need to cover in there. And so one thing that I realized that my suit maker, who is now my friend, did very well was to not just like lay out all the options there for me, but instead to educate me on what was needed for me to achieve my purpose. Yeah, so I was a magician was looking for a suit. So that boiled down to a few different key criteria that I need in order for the suit to perform its best function. Number one, I perform at quite high-end places, very atas. So
you need to tell the audience what is your performer alias.
Well, it's just me, but I performed at close-up occasions for magic and quite high-end events as well. So I won't say an issue with that, but the thing to that is to know that as a magician or as a performer, you have to always dress one cut above everyone else. No matter how everyone is dressed, you have to be slightly more formal or slightly better or more well-dressed. So that's number one. Number two, being a performer, then you need some kind of flashiness in there, right? But at the same time, you cannot look like a clown. Okay, no offense to the clowns out there, but what I mean is for a more atas crowd, they are not inclined to someone who is loud in like sequins and blink and fashion in that way, right? So how do you appear atas, well-cultured and above the cut, right? And the last part of it is definitely you do not want to have this fashion or etiquette boo-boos because it's an atas crowd as well. So based on all those factors, actually, what my suit maker told me was to literally think about it in certain ways. The first thing that I had to settle on was my lapel, right? So there's different kind of lapels, thick, medium, thin, then there's short, there's pig, basically many different ones, right? And what is the options that you want to go for, right? Rather than laying it out, he immediately suggested that I go for a certain type of lapel because it is considered more formal than the rest and is good for ladies while educating me along the way, right? So that's part one. Second part to it, then he mentioned about the cloth as well. And because of how atas it has to be and fleshy and non-fleshy at the same time, he suggested a Tom Ford cloth. And if you guys are into brands and stuff, you would know when I say Tom Ford, that means that it's going to be expensive, right? So the Tom Ford cloth was this particular sheen that only showed up in stage lighting. So outside of stage lighting, we're going to be looking kind of pretty much blackish maroon, but very formal, right? But under the stage lighting or in events and situations where there were lighting, you could see this special sheen that comes through the cloth.
So it's almost like a lights on moment. It's time to perform.
Yeah, exactly. And the third point that they pointed out to me was that in wearing suits, by right, when you have two buttons, in all etiquettes, right, the right etiquette is actually to button only the top button.
Oh.
So the bottom button, don't ask me what it exists for, I have no idea, right? But in actual dressing and etiquette classes, you're not supposed to button the bottom buttons, right? And that is kind of a problematic thing in Singapore culture. So it's very strange because not everyone is educated that way. Not everyone knows it. And yet, if you do it right, some people think that you're not wearing right. And when you do it wrong, then the people who know also knows that you're doing it wrong.
I thought it's just to release a bit so that you can eat more food.
Yeah, not sure about that. Maybe that was one of the purpose, right? But to overcome that, there was a simple solution. It's just remove the bottom button.
Oh, okay.
So with all the considerations and all that, then based on how he crafted the suit for me, after educating me through why it was certain cloth, certain type of lapel, certain type of lining, reinforced lining because I'm a magician, so on and so forth, then the price tag added up to 3,000. And guess what? It was not the only suit I got from him. In fact, funny thing is he's now the only suit maker that I generally go to.
Wow. So you become, okay, it's very interesting, right? Because you talk about this idea of education marketing, so much so that you became a super fan and you never looked at other brands, or you never at least tried to see what other suit makers are there.
I think when it comes to education marketing, there is a certain sort of authority that is imbued from the person who has given the education, right? So I believe and trust in his sense of fashion, in his industry knowledge, and in what he proposes as the best option for me. Yeah.
That's fun, right? Let's talk about other brands. Do you see or know of any other brands that are using education marketing in the space?
There are many brands out there that's using education marketing, and some of the more fun ones that you may not have known that kind of had the education marketing, even so much so that it is included in their names and all that, is actually from a recent trip in Osaka. They find out about Glicoman. So for
Glicoman.
yes, are you
like
a Pocky? Yeah, what's that? Pocky?
Pocky, yeah.
Yes, are you a Pocky fan?
Yes, I only take Pocky chocolate flavor, nothing else.
Noted. So for those of you who don't know, Glicoman is actually, Glico is the brand, right, of that guy who's standing right over there. And why it's so iconic as well is definitely because of the brand and the product and the educational aspect that came along with it as well. Firstly, Glico is called Glico because of this thing called glycogen.
Scientific.
Yes, thanks to my bio background, I understand what that means. But without going into too much details, right, basically the founder of the brand realized that glycogen is an important nutritional supplement for kids. And he used glycogen to create a glycogen, I believe it's glycogen caramel candy, right? So therein was the start of this particular brand called glyco, which is from glycogen. All right, second part of it is how then they become like so tied in with this particular image, right? The guy with that hair race. So it also ties in with the brand message as well, which is very cool, that it is a lot about nutrition and health in that sense. And because of that, of course, naturally with health, besides food, the other aspect of it is exercise. So the guy who is doing that is literally a marathon runner, passing the final
Well,
line.
he's wearing very tight clothing.
Not sure, I did not notice that, but yeah. So therein then ties that into the brand image as well. And I think the interesting aspect is from understanding the educational parts of it and educating people about glycogen and the supplement and everything was the formation or the key formation of the brand. Right.
Oh, wait, it's like that because finishing line.
Yes.
Oh.
That's right. So
yay, like
yes,
that, right?
correct. So I think when it comes to education marketing, yes, there's one part where we can talk about creating authority and stuff, right? Secondary part about making sure that your product becomes the only logical choice, right? And then the third part is even as far back as to tie in with your brand mission, your product, what does it actually do? Which is more of health, right? Which is something that I think right now we actually don't associate with glyco anymore. Not so much.
We associate it with Osaka.
Yeah, and I mean, I only remember glyco basically because of the jingle, glyco.
Glyco.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
And probably, Poke sticks and stuff like that. But honestly, right now we don't. But that has become a endearing symbol in Osaka. And it's like the place where you have to go and do your photo shot, your Instagram post that shows that you have been to Osaka. And I think that it shows the real power in education marketing, that you can create such a big movement in such a strong brand message that it can become a symbol of a city.
Wow, powerful. We talk about suits, we talk about candies. Those are products, right? Is there anything in the service industry that we can also use edu marketing?
When we talk about service industries, definitely there is. We have done marketing as well for real estate agents. So the key thing about real estate agents is that a lot of times when it comes to real estate agents, the service seems interchangeable. It's hard for a real estate agent to say really differentiate themselves because the services at least in the client's eyes, can be quite interchangeable. And there's literally thousands, if not tens of thousands of real estate agents in Singapore. How much differentiation can you afford to push, right? But what we can do, not just from the differentiation point of view, is then how can you build your brand authority, right? And from there, get your clients to listen to you. So we worked with a couple, right, who were real estate agents, both of them. It was a very interesting concept that they actually educate their clients on the fact that in a person's lifetime, if you were to want to do a home upgrade, technically it's kind of like an arcade game. Yeah.
How does that
work, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, they say specifically arcade game because you have 3 strikes and you're out. So you have 3 tries, right, before you can no longer upgrade.
3 strikes because...
Well, if you think about it, I mean, from the perspective of when your working years are, how much you need to save up in order to get there. And then also in terms of waiting for capital appreciation.
So it's like exit. 3 exits equals to the 3 strikes in arcade games.
Yeah, correct. And that's literally only like when you're in your 20s, you're still building your income and all that. So you pretty much cannot start yet.
Yeah.
Your first start will be like 20 plus probably.
Or 30s, early 30s.
Early 30s, right? And then 10 years down the road, you're probably safe enough. And first thing, you have to exit your MOP as well.
Yeah.
If you are in that first housing, HDB kind of housing, right? So that's the first part. Then you move on to your 40s and then your 50s, if you were to take those two chances. And most of the time, by the time you hit like 50s and above, you're not able to take further loans. And that's kind of like where you're stuck.
Oh, so
already.
3 strikes and you're out. That's quite cute.
Yeah, so pretty much they use this as a educational point, and use it as an in point to educate their clients as to why it is important for them to make a move or think about upgrading when they are in the stage that they can, because you literally only have 3, right? 3 chances if you put it that way. So I think it's a very interesting point of view because they're using or utilizing this framework that we have. It's called little known but big impact.
Little known but big impact.
Yes.
Actually, that's true. If you didn't tell me about 3 strikes and I counted myself, I wouldn't think I only had 3 strikes in Singapore.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll think that I have a long life ahead of me and maybe I'll think about it later.
Yeah, exactly. And I think put into context, it's little known, but then it does have a very, very big impact in terms of your final outcome. In this case, the final property that you're living in, your decision-making process as well. So this is what we would class as little known but big impact. And just to add that they really closed a lot of appointments as well. So from there, I think we did one run and they had like 50 solid appointments from that run. Yeah.
Interesting. Little known, big impact.
Yes.
Are there any others to think about?
Yes, besides little known but big impact, you can also think about it from 2 other ways. One is called the domino effect, and the other one is called well-known but misunderstood. So, for example, when we're talking about domino effect, as the name suggests, it is the one thing or the first tile that you're going to tip over and it's going to go all through, right?
Okay.
So what is that one thing that will change everyone's trajectory in terms of the outcome? So if you can isolate this one thing, and this is part of your service, part of your product, then this is something that you can actually use.
I heard of a story where they talk about weight management. And one thing they mentioned was that, you know, there is a lot of reasons why you managed to get out of shape or you couldn't maintain your weight, right? And if you really go back and look at all the reasons, you can actually pinpoint to that one thing that you didn't do correct at the start.
Yes.
That led to all these cascading effects.
Yes, that's right. And that is exactly what we mean by domino effect. And if you can educate your clients that your product or service can overcome or resolve this particular point, then the natural thing that is to follow is that they will receive the results that they want.
Interesting. Is there any examples for that?
Quoting from that weight example, weight management example, then we are talking about, for example, the client that we worked with used the 3 R's, right? Reset, restore, revive. And the key domino that was not really talked about was the reset. Yeah. So if you don't reset, that means your organ is not functioning at its optimal level, right? Everything else is road down south, right? No matter how you're going to exercise, no matter how you're going to be eating
good food,
healthy and stuff, it's just not going to work. That is the one thing that's going to change everything. Yeah.
What else?
In terms of domino effect, I think...
you mentioned there is the well-known, widely misunderstood.
Yes, that's true. For well-known misunderstood, I think it's a little bit more self-explanatory, right? Usually what we see when we are talking about well-known misunderstood, you can look at it from 2 different points of view. It's either from a principal point of view, right? What is well-known but widely misunderstood, or you can look at it from a totally different point of view, which is what are some of the myths out there that you can overcome. or you can crack, right, and educate your clients about. So, for example, one of the well-known but misunderstood would be talking about passive income,
Yeah.
right, in investing. And our clients use this whole idea about passive income, which is very well known, right? But to talk about it from a principle point of view, that is actually misunderstood because you don't actually want passive income, but you're looking for this stud, which is called the big unbreakable pot, right? Which is the bigger lump sum of money that you want to start with rather than going straight for passive income. So that's from a very principle point of view.
Yeah.
Right. From a very myth point of view, one of the things that we've done with our clients before is to literally expose some myths, right? Whether is it about, for example, green tea causes or green tea can lead to weight loss. Is that true or false? So on and so forth. And by really explaining and educating your clients on this, you're really putting yourself at a much higher level as an educator, as a teacher, as a mentor, as someone who's not selling, but teaching people the exact criteria of what they need and therefore leading to a logical sale.
So it's just like your suit maker. He didn't really sell you the suit, but he taught you how he was going to do it and the reasoning behind it.
Exactly right. So it's not about my suit is very good, so it's worth $3,000, right? Which would be how most people would look at it. But instead, educating based on you need this because your outcome is that.
Right.
And of course, the only person who can achieve this is me.
Why do you think education marketing is so important in today's world?
I think in a world where there is choices abundant, right?
Yeah.
Where literally everything is available online to find, people are in a state where there's just so much noise and clutter around, right? And to be able to cut through that clutter is tough. And to be able to educate would be something that really changes how people look at things and how people choose things. So one of the things that we talk about is educating not on the content, but on the context of it, which is not what to choose, but how to choose your product or service.
You know, I saw some of your content, right? And the interesting example I remember through this is the cheese example.
The cheese example?
The one where your brother pointed out there's an error in the price point.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
How did the story go?
For the cheese, I think it's about how to make a sale, right? Because you need to change or frame people's mind differently. And when I say frame, I mean to really put their mind at a different state as what they were originally in. Right? So the cheese story goes like this. Basically, that I was actually going through this supermarket with my brother over the weekends. And at the hour, I actually saw this 2 packets of cheese that was going on for a discount price. Right? So I can't remember the exact price, but this is how it goes in terms of how it would have been pricing wise. 2 for $5.
So one for $2.50?
Yeah, and 1 for $2.
Oh.
So the question here is, how would you buy this?
If I'm a fan of cheese, I will separate the receipts.
Yeah, so you will buy 2, right?
Yeah.
But
separate.
1 each time,
Yeah.
right? And that was kind of what was going through my brother's brain as well. So he was like, oh, this is so stupid, right? I'm going to buy 1 2 times. So the interesting thing is then we are no longer in the state of, are we going to buy the cheese? Instead is, how are we going to buy the cheese? And instead of buying the cheese once, now you're buying it twice, right? So it's how then people change their state of mind into a purchasing state, either to take advantage of certain things or because they have actually truly understood the value of something.
Let's talk about some very familiar brands in the world. Owndays.
Yes. So I think with Owndays, what they have done in terms of Edumarketing is they have gone in a space where they talk about how do you choose your frames. Right. So if you think about it, as a kid, you probably, if you have myopia, right, you probably have had specs before. And a few things that are quite irritating with spectacles. Number one, they leave a mark on your face. Number two, you probably sat on them, they probably cracked, or you played like basketball or something and they're so heavy, they're just sliding around, you can't keep them on your face, stuff like that. Right. So Owndays actually went into this educational marketing in that sense, where they teach people how to choose the frames. And the frames has got to be lightweight, how it sits on the nose, how it's super flexible so that when you accidentally sit on it, don't test, I have no idea if it works, right? It will not totally break or it will not break. And that formed the key criteria how to choose that particular product.
Wait, were they the ones that invented the foldable spectacles?
Yes, they were the ones
Okay.
that, well, I won't say invented a foldable spectacles, but they did something with sunglasses and spectacles as well. There was like an add-on and can be kept and stuff like that. Yeah, but I think the key point here is now with this how to choose, if you were to go out there and look at other frames, firstly, you would be weighing against those criteria. And I must say first, you do not just teach criteria in a way that is manufactured. It has to make logical sense to someone, right? If I were to say my criteria is that the glass must be fragile, then that doesn't make sense, right? How you choose is the glass must be fragile. That doesn't make sense, right? But what is logical and what does it mean to the consumers as a benefit or as the outcome that they want to achieve? Right. And I think that with all the products, there's usually a unique problem-solving perspective. And in this case, flexibility and the way that the material was the main unique UPSP, unique problem-solving perspective. And therefore, they crafted the criteria of how to choose a specs frame against or with that. Yeah.
It's time to put you on a spot.
Again, okay.
Okay. My personal dream is to, say, open a fashion boutique.
Okay.
Yeah. I guess it's like number 30 on my bucket list. But if I were to open a fashion boutique, right, how would I think about utilizing education marketing?
So first and foremost, do you have any unique problem-solving perspective from the fashion point of view?
Yes.
And what would that be?
I detest ironing clothes to the core.
Okay. And anything else?
I guess I love to wear t-shirts. So I think t-shirts would be maybe my main boutique line. Different type of t-shirts, designs, all these things.
Okay. So I think where you can go from educational marketing, if we use, let's talk about using criteria and education on criteria, then I would probably talk about how to choose t-shirts, right? And you can think about it in a few different ways, right? One is, can you also craft your t-shirts in a certain way that fits a certain body type? That is, for example, Asian or particular to someone or a certain type of body.
Oh, I know. You know how European t-shirts, right? Their sleeves are a lot shorter. I hate that. Yeah, so I was thinking, if only there's a product line that can produce longer sleeves.
Yeah.
Right? That it's still have a lot of different designs to it, like graphic tees, right? But longer sleeves.
Yes, exactly. And on top of that, singular one of this criteria wouldn't work, right? Because then you're just saying that I have longer sleeves, technically, right?
Yeah.
So how do you change that into a criteria? For example, does it fit? Is it when you are choosing the right t-shirt fit? You have to look at, your sleeves covering 1/3 of your arm, and that is
Yeah,
the
to hide
perfect,
the bye-bye fat.
right?
So maybe a target audience is like ladies going into older age, right?
Yes, exactly. Then not just that, right? Then you can marry it with other criteria that make it even stronger. Then we talk about other things like, for example, one of the things that I can think about that is very hot out there is color matching to your skin tone. Right.
Ah, okay.
So you can
interesting.
probably talk about how do you find the right colors and how do you match the right colors and then use that against your shirts as well. And build up based on that what kind of criteria that you have in here. I would say that the key focus here would be to understand what your target market is going to be
Yeah.
so that you can craft the criteria around them. Right. There's different things like, for example, it could be a morning wear, evening wear. There's so many types of body shapes out there. There are shirts that cater to dead bods, right? There are shirts.
Looser on the bottom.
Yes.
Oh, that's smart.
And there are shirts that cater to gym bods. It's specifically for gym rats or gym freaks or gym nerds, which is a maybe better word, right? To show off their muscles. Right. So there's just different ways. And what you need to do then is to educate your target audience on how do you choose this particular type of clothes. And I will say niche it down if you can, because that's where you will find that the criteria would exist and help you along the way.
No, recently I was having lunch with a friend of ours, and he spoke about color analysis.
Oh, okay.
So it's quite a big thing in Singapore right now, apparently, right? Influence from Korea,
Right.
where you either travel to Korea to do a color analysis, or there's a few in Singapore right now doing that.
Yeah.
So I do find it very genius because it kind of falls in the criteria of education marketing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think the interesting thing when you think about criteria is to not think about just what is about your product, but what surrounds your product as well.
What surrounds my product? Okay.
So one of the interesting example that I have from a business mentor is how he was a photographer, right? But as a wedding photographer, then what is the parallel or what is the surrounding environment of this particular service? And in this case, it's interesting because if you think about it, then there's so many traditions, so many things to do at a wedding, right? The bride is dressed. The groom may or may not be there yet. The mother and father have different opinions on how things are going to be done, right? And the wedding photographer happens to be the middleman, right? Who can offer expertise, advice, and guide along the way and make sure that things go well.
Oh my gosh, when you said that, it reminds me of my sister's wedding. It's exactly the same. Like we hired a really good photographer.
Right.
And throughout, right? Because during the wedding day, you have to go to the home, you have to exchange some sort of gifts. I'm not a very ritual tradition person, so I was like absolutely clueless. But then, so we were like kind of like, okay, what do we do next? Like, is there a 及时? Like, when do we go to the house or something like that, right?
Yeah.
And then this photographer came, and then it's like, okay, 不用担心，不用担心，妈妈在这边，爸爸在这边 right? 你要站这样站 OK 来把这个东西过去 So I was like, oh, okay, that photographer actually became our ritual person.
Yeah. And there's a
Right.
sense of relief, right?
Yeah, you guided.
Yeah, absolutely. But the thing is, it has nothing to do with the service technically that he's providing or she's providing, right? So what is the environment, right, that you can create this criteria, and it will be so much stronger if you realize this criteria from the start, as opposed to when you experience the service and go, oh my God, that's so important, right? Instead of that, can you pull this right from the experience itself and bring it up all the way to educate your clients from the start, so that when they're looking for someone, they would always go back to this criteria and ask, do you know about these customs? Are you aware of these traditions? Can you guide us along the way? How would you manage this? Right. And if someone else is on the selection list, well, then you can be assured that, not everyone's going to hit those criteria. Anyway, you crafted those criteria for yourself, right? And then you can be assured that they will come back to you if that criteria is important enough for them.
Let's talk about that, right? Criteria being important enough for them. That means naturally you will have people that hate your service or product. Naturally, you have people who love your product and service.
I am of the opinion that if everyone is okay with your product and service, just okay, then your product and service is just okay as well.
Just okay. Hashtag.
Hashtag just okay service. But it is true because the thing is you either stand on the fence or you stand for something. And for any I think any service, any company, any product, right, that is going to make it big in the world, there must be a unique thing about it that is good. And when there's a good side, there's always going to be a negative side. Right? So if I'm a photographer, for example, going back to the same example just now, if I'm a photographer who specializes in catching unedited moments, non-post, right, which is how I like my photos, right, then you are 100% going to meet couples who would not like those photos. Because there are people who would prefer that only the best side in that sense is ever shown on camera in shoots, in photos, because it's a moment of forever, right? But for me, I like feeling the moment. So capturing that has a memory tied to it. I do not want a post photos. So if you are on one side, then definitely you're going to hit people who say, no, I'm not for your service. And that's absolutely okay. In fact, you would want that.
Yeah.
Because being very clear and upfront about what you're for, educating people about what you're for is so important so that you can gain good raving fans. So that you can find people who love you from the start as opposed to people that you're not too sure, they're kind of okay-ish, right? And by the end of it, they may or may not be your fans.
Right.
Right. So actually being really clear about what or who you do not serve is as important as who you want to serve.
So you are agency owner, right? What is your agency for?
I think I'm stuck. And I would like to refer to the notes.
You need to Edumarket me.
We need to get a little bit of a break.
Okay. We come back to this later, right? Okay, so I expect that, since we're on the topic of making enemies and getting super hot raving fans,
Yeah.
I believe that you have to go through the process of receiving a lot of no's,
Yes.
right? So, I mean, I imagine I'm a business. Now that I have Edumarketing criteria,
Yeah.
I go out there, I pitch, and then no, right? So isn't that going to take like a lot more time to build up over the course? Is there like a faster way to do it?
The answer is yes if you were going to use the educational criteria and content only on the front end of the funnel, as we call it.
Front end of the funnel.
Yes,
Okay.
that means that if you're going to be putting that out only on the marketing ad side or when you're doing a one-to-one sales close, for example. And that's not to say that that's not good, right? But to make this massive way to scale and to get more yeses, qualified people who are going to say yes to you, right, is to put everything in a systemized, systemized plan and structure, or in this case, what I call the marketing funnel, and make sure that people go through the process.
How do you make sure of that?
So in terms of how we look at it from a marketing point of view is who's exposed to it from the top, right? Where do they go to that they're exposed to the next level of marketing, where they are not just experiencing the educational front end of it, but in a framework that they are persuaded even further on a deeper level, from a principle level with criterias, right, as to how to choose and as to the exact way to choose as well before they go to the closing. So the weird thing is most people kind of sway between two. And when I say most people, I mean business owners, right? So you get the one end who says that I want a large number of leads,
Yeah.
right? And then on the flip side, then you have people who would say then, but I want quality leads,
Yeah.
right?
That's important.
Yes. And I would say that if you're going just purely for large number of leads, there's going to be a few kind of downfalls, right? Number one, operationally, can you even fulfill taking the large number of leads, right? I remember this being shared by one of my business mentor. He said that if you're not ready, right, to even talk to people or have a proper funnel at the back end, then you cannot get the large number of leads because you will die in a month. And this is how I described it. First day, you're going to get 2 leads. You're fine. Change your thing, keep pitching. Day 2, you get another 2. By day 7, you have pitched 14.
Yeah.
And you are now stuck because you probably piled up a lot of things that you haven't finished.
Oh.
Right. And if you continue scaling, right, at day, whatever it is, 15 or so, you get 10 leads, and all 10, you have no idea how to close. They're not qualified. They're wasting your time. You are frustrated. Nobody's getting anything through. It will come to an end conclusion. It doesn't work.
Right.
Right. So that's when you're going for just massive without understanding the back end, the quality, and all of that. Right. So the flip side is then, oh, can I get quality leads? And most of the time you say, oh, quality leads going to be a few leads because it's going to be expensive. You're going to filter. And that's correct. Right. If the funnel is planned as such. Right. So the question is, can we get both big number and quality? And to do that is not impossible. In fact, that's what it should be done, is to aggregate the educational awareness that you have, the awareness that you have built from all the education content, bits and pieces, and everywhere else, aggregate them into an educational summit of sorts, which is either, it can be a webinar, it can be a video, it can be a seminar, it can be a physical event, basically another place where you can actually go in depth into the educational content in terms of criteria, in terms of creating that paradigm shift or the mindset shifts, as I call it, from the principal point of view. Right. And then from there to do your call to action. And simply because you have done a massive aggregation from everywhere. And if you have the platform that is going to do it for you 24/7 without you being there, it can be by your agency, it can be technology, it can be AI, right? Pushing to one single source, right? Then you pretty much have a very good chance that you can get a high number who are quality leads. Yeah.
Going back to the idea of the platform, right? I think a lot of people have this question, and I have that myself as well. Does webinar still work today? I mean, I saw at least last year or last 2 years during the last 3 years during COVID, right? There were a lot of people coming out to do webinar, right? Does it still work today?
The short answer is yes, because if not, then a lot of the companies will have gone down. If you are looking at the space, you know what I mean, right? But the question to examine here is, why do you think it's not working, right? So there are 2 reasons that most people quote for thinking that it's not working. Number one is that, well, it's now past COVID, right? And people are going out. So webinar has no space anymore.
Yeah.
Right. And the second reason quote is it's everyone knows that webinar is a selling event.
Yeah.
Right. And it's therefore there is no value. People don't go to webinars. First, let's dissect one by one. Right. For number one, yes, there is definitely an increased amount of people outside. But if you are offering a webinar, and think of it also from a company point of view, especially in Singapore. So I think it has to do with geography as well, right? In Singapore, we are so land scarce that physical event space are incredibly expensive.
Yeah.
So if you were to take that into context, and if you were to use it to transform from an event versus a webinar, right? It actually makes more sense for a webinar to be done.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's number one. And two, I think that people do still attend webinar. The fact is, since COVID, the general acceptance of over online Zoom meetings, webinars has been higher than ever.
That's true.
The Gen Zs, the new generations, are literally of the generation that they live and breathe their life through their computers, through their laptops, through their mobile phones. So I would beg to differ if you say that webinars are like totally gone, right? So that's the part that I would say. As for the second part, whether the webinar work because people are so wary of them, I think that that's got to do with bad rep from the bad webinars. And I think with any type of framework, any type of structure, any type of funnel, there's always going to be pros, there's always going to be cons, and there's always going to be the bad eggs that hold back the entire funnel or the industry in that sense, right? And I truly believe that if your webinar offers value, real value, you are doing real education, not hard selling, not a preview, but an education where you are sharing important things that matters to people's life and being very upfront about your intention, then I think that that webinar will work. Yeah.
So what is important in a webinar that makes it work?
I think firstly is understanding that when you have a webinar, it's not like a checklist kind of webinar. I've seen a lot of webinars, and don't get me wrong, they do have their space, but not as a marketing side of it. That means if you're going to, say, give pure value in the sense of, I just want to give everyone a ABC checklist, right, of what to do. For
So
example,
here's like 3 things to take note of when you blah, blah, blah.
maybe it's literally a webinar of how to submit your tax. Step 1, go to this. Step 2, go to this. Yeah, that's great, right? But if you are really looking at educational criteria, changing people's mindset, teaching people how to choose, then your webinar needs to be structured in a certain framework that makes it work, right? And you need to teach people from, like I said, the principle point of view, and not teaching people the content, the very surface level kind of selling or surface level kind of education.
Could you give an example so that it's a bit clearer? Just now you were mentioning the tax example, right? So instead of like, okay, here are 3 things that you need to do to file your taxes, for example. This is content, I suppose, right? What is a principle, or what is the context of it?
So if you think about submitting taxes, first thing you have to understand is, why are people so highly objectionable? All right, do not like to submit tax.
Because you give money long.
Yeah.
Money
so
out of
it's,
pocket.
It's about money out of the pocket, right?
Yeah.
So but actually, do you know that when you're submitting taxes, it's not just money out of your pocket, but it's how do you save money also?
Yes.
Yes. So the first thing then is also educating people about what are their objections, right? And how to shift that mindset around, right? And that's not to say, hey, do you know that your tax submission is just like saving money also? And then that's it, right? Because that's like, huh? Duh. Right?
Yeah.
But it's really going into detail as to why, the specifics, how, and how that can be done. Right? And what is that ultimate benefit outcome of it as well. right? How does it fit in from a diagnostics point of view? Is this person going to save certain money for future? Is this tax going to impact the company? Is this going to impact the person? How does it impact and why does it matter to that person, right? So all of that then becomes a more contextual kind of education.
So to understand it better, is instead of saying generic content that applies to everybody and everyone goes like duh, right? It's about understanding their situation. What do they care about, right? What do they find important? And contextualizing your content to help them understand how it actually helps them in return.
Yes, exactly that.
So how does the criteria or the principle part comes in?
I think on the criteria and principle part then is again back to sharing something that is important. The unique problem solving perspective again, right? And then when it goes into the criteria, we're talking about why and how is your product something that's totally different and how does it solve the problem for them, right? And educating, it's based again on the person's environment. So if I were to educate based on just now what we talked about, which was on the suits and stuff, right? If I was just generally educating that, oh, okay, you need a higher class lapel because it's more formal, right? There's no context to it. Again, there's no diagnostics that come from you are a magician, therefore you need this, right? And then educating that my jacket is this, right? And only I can do it this way, for example.
Yeah. You know, you used to run a magician talent management company. I heard some very interesting stories of how you frame your product a certain way to match a certain group of people. Could you share a bit more about that?
Two different parts of it. I started off as a kids magician,
Okay.
right? And at that point in time, kids magicians were charging roughly about $250 for a show, right? And for me, I charge way differently. I charge at that point in time was about $400 to $800. So it's about 2 to 3 times difference from the
Wow.
rest of the market. And how I share with regards to why they should choose me is from a very fundamental principle that do you agree that a child can be easily influenced by people around them?
Yeah, for sure.
Yes. So I think most parents can agree to that, right? And do you think that a child actually just by osmosis being in the environment, right, and listening, hearing about things actually learns as well?
Yeah, more so than classroom learning.
Absolutely. So based on those few criteria, I dictated something of a criteria that as a kids magician, if you were to engage a kids magician, there are things that you need to make sure that a kids magician have, right, or do. Number one, they need to be well spoken, right? It would be best if this person has a high level of education. I didn't put it that way, but there can be a more refined way of framing it or talking about it. And if the show includes positive lessons that is encompassed within it, right? So coming from that point of view, right, the shows that I do, they are about female empowerment and there are positive life lessons that are inbuilt inside.
Right.
Right. And the part about being well spoken, higher level education and all that actually was also born out of the industry where there were a lot of different magicians. And I wanted to place myself in a slightly different light, knowing that I was a graduate as well. So the strange part of the story is later on in my kids magician's life, right? As a kids magician, I tend to have parents who go around asking their friends, like, hey, do you know like what she's doing? can you guess like what she studies? Like what kind of course she's in? And she's like, oh, she's a honors in bioscience. And they're like,
So it became bragging rights.
yeah, it became bragging rights as well. So, I mean, it was a strange kind of end of the story, but the criteria that I structured around that then made it such that they would choose me over the other magicians.
So that's very interesting because, we talk about how affiliate marketing is very powerful, the word of mouth referral.
Yep.
But the truth is, some brands, you just don't know how to refer them in a less, how do I call it?
Salesy way.
Salesy way, or without showing intent. So it's like, hey, I actually have very good news to tell you. But if I tell you, I will look like maybe I'm their brand ambassador, I'll look a bit paiseh, right? Or, it just doesn't look good. So a lot of, I think agents especially, they like to keep all these to themselves.
Mm-hmm.
They don't like to share openly.
Yeah.
Because that kind of fosters some identity of sorts. But for your case, because you define the criteria, right, they use that criteria as a bragging right, which also turned into more referrals for your business, I suppose.
Yes, that's right. And I extended out that part of it later on to the branding and the marketing that I did for my magic artist management company, right? And one part of it was that as a magician who is representing a brand, right? You definitely do not want the brand ambassador to be like a bit off, weird. And so therefore my whole marketing was that all my magicians were from the university and grads, right? And well-spoken, presentable, so on and so forth. So again, built the entire criteria again around the team that I had.
That's a very interesting topic that you touched on, the idea of scaling and how you scale a business. I believe that a lot of business that is very front-facing, right? The owners, they have a difficulty in scaling the company because every time I go to someplace else, they will always request for me to fulfill that service.
Yes.
Right? But in your case, because you created that criteria and you replicated the criteria across all your different team members who are front-facing as well.
Yeah.
And that inevitably became your unique perspective or your unique selling point.
Yes, that's right. So a lot of times actually I sell my team and not myself. Yeah. And I guess because of how the marketing was done, they are pretty assured of the quality that they can get from my company as well.
Right. So I think a word to business owners looking at scaling their company, you need a criteria.
A criteria that's scalable, that is.
I see. Of course. Could you share more about the webinar that you are about to be doing? What is that webinar about? Who should be part of this webinar?
For this webinar, I'm really trying to share more about the educational marketing that we are doing. I see a lot of business owners out there who are struggling with a few things. Number one, it's leads, they're coming in, they're not closing, right? And there's a huge struggle with that. Is it a problem on the sales closing front? Or is it a problem on the marketing front? So there always seems to be like this continual struggle there. And if these two departments are kind of split, they tend to like point at each other.
Yeah, I recently saw a reel on Instagram. It's by a very flamboyant salesperson. And it's like 4 things I hate in my life. That one, marketers. So they're always constantly at war.
Yeah. And the thing is, I don't think it needs to be at war. Firstly, it shouldn't. I think it shouldn't be. And secondly is, I think that the educational marketing framework, it should extend from the front all the way to the back. And it should be a uniform thing. All right. So I feel that if we can cover it from the front, firstly, it makes sales closing easier. And if sales closing also takes up the educational marketing strategy or using the educational criteria, it makes their closing way easier as well. So I think people who are struggling with leads, right, are not closing, then I think using my framework, that will be something that is very beneficial to them. Yeah. Second part is then people who have I guess, leads that are qualified, but not enough leads. Like, how do you scale a one-to-one appointment?
Yeah, it's very hard unless you have an army of sales officers.
Exactly. And not just that, you either are dependent usually on a star salesperson, which means that there's key man risk, right? Or you are dependent on yourself as a business owner, which I know most people are,
Yeah.
right? And then what happens at the end of the day is you are like just maxed out by appointments,
Yeah.
not able to take on other parts of the business that you so desperately want to be involved in, whether it's product development, business development, or even just like settling operations and stuff like that. So then it's about using the right system, right, to make sure that all of these are coming in at a consistent rate, or at least at the press of a button from your side, that you have a bulk of qualified leads that are coming in. Yeah. So it's about teaching how this entire system works, right? And the final part of it is that when we talk about webinar, a lot of people, like I say, may have this question: do webinar work? Is it like a certain sort of framework? So I know the system, you
Or
know.
is it even for me? Because if I'm selling a very simple product or a very common service, right? Is there anything you say on the webinar even?
Yeah, I think that in general, like that's what my webinar is going to cover, and exactly why I'm using a webinar. Hey, yeah, right. So in the webinar itself, I will also teach what goes in the webinar, because you can have the front part of it is great, and then everyone turns out at the webinar, and then nothing goes in the webinar, and then that would still be a failure,
Flop, yeah.
right? So we need to understand what goes in the webinar. How is it going to be? How do you persuade, right? And how do you set your clients into this mindset of what to choose, how to choose, and what are the shifts that you need them to achieve in order to get there, right? And that's essentially what I'll be covering in the webinar itself. And I think at the end of it, you can definitely take all of this and get started. If anything at all, the front ends of it is definitely something that you can start almost immediately. And then you can go through the framework if you like to set it up yourself. Or if not, then there's a chance also to work with me and my agency to help you set that up entirely.
I was about to ask, is there sales in the webinar? But I guess you answered that part.
Well, the thing is, I don't see it as sales per se. I see it as offering my help if there is someone who needs it, because there's always two ways that you can go around it. One is you can take everything that I've said, because I believe that whatever I've taught, someone can take it and go away with it and set it up. And that's totally cool, right? Because there's people who need to do that, and there are people who need to mess around with things to get a hang of it,
Yeah.
right? But if you are someone who is in need of setting it now, you don't have the time, you don't want to waste the money, the resources to do a trial and error, to figure out this bit of tech, that little bit of platforms, right? I can do it for you guys. And that's where I come in.
Awesome. Let's take a short break. Okay, so my goal is I wanted to cover some objections and ask the questions for the objections of the webinar. Are there other at the top of your mind that you want to address?
Objections.
Mm.
I think I didn't answer so well on the product.
What product?
As in, does it work for everything?
Oh, you
Yeah,
want to try that?
sure, but I'm not sure how it's going to like get edited inside.
Well, it can be lah.
Okay.
So let's think about education web. Sorry.
Additional music.
Yeah. Okay. So let's think about education marketing. Is it for every product and service out there?
I would say that most of the products out there can benefit from it. There are certain products that are more, I would say, easier to craft than the others, but generally all products can benefit from it. As to whether the webinar is the right one, meaning that educational marketing can exist in different formats and not just webinar. I would say that webinar would be great for services, especially for services, where you do have to take time to educate people. Will be great for certain things that are a little bit more customized. For commodities and stuff like that, meaning real commodities, right? Educational criteria and educational marketing can work as well, but you're probably not driving to a huge webinar for those. Yeah, so I would say just join us and have a sense of it to understand how educational marketing can be done. And then we can explore if this is something that can be crafted for your business or not.
Okay. So now I'm going to go quick fire questions. I will show you some products / commodities. The more plain, the more simple, right? It'll be more interesting.
Okay.
Okay, ready? So when I say a product, you have to think about an interesting criteria that we can use to educate people about the product.
Okay.
Okay. White rice.
You can educate based on things like gluten-free. You can educate based on glycemic index, stuff like that. And literally also how to cook rice to the best so that your rice is the best nutritious rice that you can ever eat.
Interesting. Trash bag.
Actually, trash bag is a very interesting topic because you can do huge education in there.
Okay.
Trash bag touches on the topic of sustainability.
Oh.
So because it's plastic in nature and stuff like that, so educational parts about how to choose a trash bag, what makes sense for you, and what trash is for, how does it affect the environment, for example.
Haircut service.
I think haircut is pretty simple. Educational parts about how do you fit it to face style.
Oh.
That's pretty common actually on the TikTok arena and in Instagram and stuff. But possibly combining it with hair colors and a few of this thing, including like hair types probably. Like my hair is super thick and wiry. And even lifestyle. Like I'm not someone who like to style my hair and stuff. What kind of haircuts suit me, right? And who can I approach to help me choose the right hairstyle?
Okay. Tuition center.
I think tuition center is pretty easy because it lies in how do I pronounce it? Methodology
Yeah.
of how you teach. So if there's something very unique about that, what's so unique? How do you choose the right methodology for your child? Yeah.
Okay, let me think. The cushion.
Now you've got me stuck. Let me think about it. Educational parts. Oh, yeah. Actually, you can do education about what's that word called? Let me think. How it can fit to your body shape, for example. If you're
cushion?
hugging a cushion,
Oh.
how does that fit? What's the material? How do you choose it? Maybe it's pet free, friendly. Sorry, not pet free, pet friendly. I hope it's pet free. Like, how is it pet friendly? Like, is it used for certain types of circumstances? Why is it better than the rest when it comes to a certain material, and how to choose the right material for your kids? For example, is it like safe for your child?
Okay, you pass. 5 out 5. Just kidding. Okay, anything else that you want to go through? I'm done with it actually.
No, I'm just very worried that it's very long.
It's fine. Okay, thank you, Jian-Ming.
I was just thinking of shooting one more though.
What?
But
stop
may not